The seating chart was a clear message. You don't count. Leia's words echoed, a cruel punctuation mark on a lifetime of feeling unseen. My assigned spot. Exiled outside the grand ballroom, near the overflowing trash receptacles. The air, thick with the cloying sweetness of lilies meant for celebration, was tainted by the sharp, clinical scent of bleach. Inside, the thumping bass line and the DJ's hyped-up voice bled through the walls as he counted down to the first dance. A countdown to my humiliation. My mother, a vision in champagne silk, fussed with her pearl necklace, her gaze carefully avoiding mine. My father, usually a well of stoic silence, seemed particularly adept at staring into the middle distance. I clutched the silver-wrapped gift I'd painstakingly chosen and wrapped the night before, the crisp paper a stark contrast to the tremor in my hands. My wine-colored dress, chosen for its subtle elegance, suddenly felt like a costume. Silence. That was my refuge, my practiced shield. No arguments, no tears, just a quiet, simmering anger that threatened to boil over. With a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and walked out into the crisp Vermont air, leaving the orchestrated perfection behind. 5 minutes later, the joyous music faltered, the chandeliers seemed to dim, and a scream, sharp and filled with raw emotion, sliced through the celebratory atmosphere. Here's how it all unfolded. The Vermont air that morning was the kind that stung your nostrils, carrying the scent of pine needles and old money. Leia, ever the connoisseur of curated experiences, had chosen the lakeside resort for its faux European charm, a place where manicured lawns met shimmering lake waters, and where people snapped photos with a desperate need to prove their status, their invitation. The glass-walled ballroom, a glittering jewel box, overlooked the water, adorned with cascading orchids and flickering candles that floated in delicate crystal bowls. Each table within shimmered beneath the extravagant chandeliers, a testament to Leia's meticulously planned fairy tale. Except my table. Mine was apparently relegated to the purgatory of the service entrance, near the overflowing bins. I had driven up alone, a 3-hour pilgrimage from Boston, Mom's last text message looping in my head like a broken record. Asterisk please Amber, no drama today. It's Leia's day. Asterisk that was all I was to her, to them. A set of instructions, a cautionary label. Asterisk don't make noise. Don't take up space. Don't remind anyone that there's another daughter. Asterisk growing up, we were the living embodiment of every tired family trope. The golden child and the forgotten one. Leia accumulated ribbons and trophies like precious jewels. I collected report cards that gathered dust, accomplishments that no one seemed to notice. She could summon rescue with a single tear. I fixed broken things and was met with indifference. Mom always said I was the easy one. Dad called me independent. Both were just polite synonyms for invisible, and invisibility was undeniably convenient for them. The last time I'd seen them all together, a forced tableau of familial harmony, was Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I remember the suffocating scent of burnt pie crust mingling with the harsh chemical odor of lemon cleaner, a futile attempt to mask the underlying tension. Leia, of course, was absent, off in Portugal with her latest conquest, and for once, the air in the house felt a little lighter, a little easier to breathe. Mom had asked me to retrieve an old photo album from her vanity drawer. Instead, drawn by a magnetic curiosity, I found her little brown journal, its edges softened and frayed from years of constant use. I flipped through it, a casual glance turning into a horrified realization. Each page began the same way. Asterisk Leia's first day of kindergarten, Leia's favorite meal, Leia's college acceptance, asterisk a relentless, unwavering chronicle of Leia's life. Not a single line about me, not my birthdays, not even my name. When I finally mustered the courage to ask her about it, Mom simply smiled, as if it were a childish question. Asterisk you never needed the attention, honey. You were always fine. Asterisk that night, I learned a devastating truth. There are two distinct kinds of forgotten: being lost and being deliberately erased. I thought about that damning journal as I walked towards the ballroom entrance, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the polished marble floor. Through the expansive glass doors, I saw them, frozen in practiced smiles, posing for photos. Mom, radiant in her champagne silk. Dad dutifully straightening his tie. And Leia, positively glowing in white, the picture of bridal perfection. She glanced up, her eyes flickered over me, and she offered a smile, the same detached, polite smile people reserved for store clerks they wouldn't remember 5 minutes later. The wedding coordinator, armed with her clipboard and an air of harried efficiency, intercepted me. "You're Miss Hayes?" she asked, her voice bright and rehearsed. "Yeah," I replied, bracing myself. Her polite smile faltered, just for a moment, as she scanned her seating chart, her finger tracing down the list. "You're listed for hallway seating," she announced, her tone laced with a hint of awkwardness. I laughed, a short, incredulous sound, waiting for her to correct herself, to tell me it was a mistake, a cruel joke. She didn't. "Hallway seating, next to the trash cans." She gestured, her hand leading the way towards a small, rickety folding table tucked away by the service doors. From that vantage point, I could see the entire ballroom, every sparkling detail, every forced laugh. But there was a wall between us, a literal barrier of glass and metal, and an invisible one built from years of neglect. I carefully placed my gift on the table, a small, silver-wrapped box that had taken me hours to select. A token of what? Hope? Resignation? I stared through the glass, a silent observer in my own family's charade. Inside, Leia was raising her glass, a triumphant queen accepting the adoration of her court. Mom was adjusting Leia's veil, her touch of benediction. Outside, I sat in the cold draft, the scent of pine battling the stench of garbage, and repeated the same tired lie I'd been telling myself for years. Asterisk, it's fine. You don't need them. Asterisk, but the truth was pressing against my chest. A heavy, solid weight. Maybe I didn't need them, but that didn't give them the right to treat me as if I simply didn't exist. I tried to fade into the background, to become one with the shadows, as I always did. But the hallway was a hive of activity. Staff members bustled through the service door, wheeling bins overflowing with melting ice, their laughter echoing under their breath. Each time the door swung open, I caught glimpses of the ballroom, the chandeliers glittering like fallen stars, the swirling dresses, my mother's hand resting on Leia's shoulder like a coronation. Then the laughter shifted, becoming sharper, more pointed. I looked up and saw Leia walking towards me, her bouquet clutched in one hand, her veil trailing behind her like a cloud of smoke. She stopped just short of the doorway, her reflection superimposed on the glass, creating a distorted image. Two versions of her. One adored, celebrated, bathed in light inside. The other, cruel, dismissive, lurking in the shadows outside. "Well?" she said, tilting her head, her eyes glinting with a malicious amusement. "Looks like they finally figured out where you belong." I blinked, momentarily stunned by her audacity. "What's that supposed to mean?" She smiled, that familiar half-smile I'd seen since childhood. The one she always wore just before she stole the spotlight. The one that promised pain. "Guess you don't count." The words landed softly, almost casually, but their impact was like a physical blow. Asterisk, guess you don't count. Asterisk, as if my existence was a mathematical error, a miscalculation in their carefully constructed world. For a long, agonizing second, I couldn't speak. My throat constricted, a desert of dryness spreading through me. The kind of dryness that comes from swallowing too much pride, too many unspoken resentments. Behind her, the photographer's voice, impatient and demanding, cut through the silence. "Bride, we need you back in the shot." She didn't move. She wanted me to react, to cry, to beg for her approval, to prove her point. I refused. I simply looked at her, my gaze unwavering, until her practiced smile flickered, a momentary crack in her perfect facade. "You know," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, "there's always been space for both of us. You're the one who keeps shrinking it." Her eyes narrowed, her composure slipping. "Oh please, Amber. Not everything is about you. This is my day. You could at least pretend to be happy for once. I let out a small, mirthless laugh, the kind that sounds like air escaping from a punctured tire. You made sure I couldn't even sit in the same room. What exactly am I celebrating? For a fleeting moment, the mask completely dissolved. I saw a flicker of something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or perhaps just a sliver of guilt. Then, she straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin, her expression hardening once more. You always twist things. Maybe Mom was right. You make everything difficult, Amber. The casual use of my name, weaponized with a subtle accusation, hit harder than I wanted it to. I pictured that little brown notebook again, every page meticulously filled with Leia's life, and absolutely nothing of mine. I'm not difficult, I said, my voice still quiet, but laced with a new resolve. You just never liked that I see things the way they are. She rolled her eyes, dismissing my words with a practiced ease. You sound just like Dad, pathetic and bitter. Face it, Amber. Nobody needs your approval. Not here, not ever. She turned on her heel, her white gown swishing dramatically, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and thinly veiled disdain. I watched her go, her reflection disappearing into the throng of well-wishers, and felt the familiar burning sensation behind my eyes, the sting of unshed tears. But this time it didn't hurt in quite the same way. The pain was cleaner, somehow less tangled with years of self-doubt. When the door finally closed behind her, sealing me off once more, I picked up the small, silver box from the table. The gift I'd chosen with such care the night before, wrapped with a quiet patience that now seemed almost absurd. I traced the satin ribbon once, my fingers lingering on its smooth surface, then slipped the box into my bag. If they didn't want me inside, fine. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Not this time. For a long while, I just sat there, my fingers pressed against the smooth edge of the box, listening to the muffled beat of the music leaking through the ballroom doors. It was supposed to be their first dance, a perfect, carefully choreographed moment. I imagined Mom wiping away a stage tear, Dad clapping awkwardly, Leia basking in the spotlight, the same scene I'd watched play out my whole life, always from the edges, always feeling like an outsider. But the edges were now razor-sharp. I stood up slowly, deliberately. My reflection stared back at me from the glass panel, still composed, maybe even graceful, if you didn't look too closely at the pain simmering beneath the surface. Inside the bag, the silver gift felt heavier than it should, weighted down with the weight of unspoken truths. I had wrapped it carefully the night before, tying the ribbon tighter than necessary, each knot a symbol of my mounting resentment. It wasn't just a present. It was proof, something that had the potential to shatter the carefully constructed image Leia had built out of lies. 3 weeks earlier, I'd run into one of her old co-workers in Boston, a chance encounter that had turned into a devastating confession. Leia had been bragging for months about marrying Rich, about how effortlessly she had manipulated Noah, how easily she had him wrapped around her finger. "He's so sweet," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension, but naive. "A few fake tears and I get the house, the money, the last name." She'd laughed. A brittle, unpleasant sound. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten in the face of her casual cruelty. I hadn't planned to use that information to weaponize her own words until today. But seeing her standing there, smug and triumphant, had ignited something within me, a long-dormant desire for justice. Before leaving the hallway, I walked back to the reception table near the ballroom entrance. The wedding planner, oblivious and harried, was distracted, fussing over the placement of centerpieces. I casually slid the small, silver box among the other gifts, placing it right on top of the pile labeled to Leia and Noah. My handwriting was neat, deliberate, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Inside the box, nestled on top of a delicate crystal frame, was a folded note and a printout of the messages her coworker had shown me, screenshots and damning receipts. Not a threat, just the cold, hard truth. I stepped back, checked my reflection in the mirrored surface one last time, straightened my dress, and smoothed my hair. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, calm, in a way that felt almost foreign, almost unsettling. Then, I turned and walked towards the exit, leaving behind the glittering spectacle and the suffocating weight of expectation. The Vermont evening hit me with a rush of cold air, a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, a distorted mirror reflecting a life I no longer recognized. I could hear the faint echo of clapping from within the ballroom, the sound of the crowd cheering for a dance I no longer cared to watch. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small, insignificant, invisible. I reached the parking lot, the crunch of gravel under my heels a satisfying sound, like the final punctuation mark in a long, drawn-out sentence. No dramatic goodbye, no tearful speech, just the quiet closure of a car door. As I started the engine, I glanced back once at the glowing windows, the indistinct silhouettes moving behind the glass, and whispered to myself, "Let the truth find its way." Inside the ballroom, the carefully orchestrated laughter still floated above the music, a fragile facade concealing the darkness beneath. A saxophone player hit a particularly saccharine note. Glasses clinked. The crowd pressed closer around the happy couple on the dance floor. Leia glowed in that heavy white gown, the very picture of the perfection she had rehearsed for months. A performance for an audience that craved the illusion of happily ever after. Noah spun her once, twice, the camera flashes painting everything in a shimmering artificial gold. From outside, through the tall windows, the scene looked like a snow globe sealed, flawless, unreal. Then the silver box was opened. It happened near the gift table, a seemingly innocuous moment that would unravel everything. A cousin, eager to please, had gathered the presents, sorting through the bows and ribbons, preparing for a photo opportunity. Someone suggested, "Let's have them open one." A spontaneous burst of excitement meant to entertain the guests. Leia, ever the performer, turned, laughing, and tugged at the satin ribbon, her movements fluid and practiced. The paper fell away, revealing the delicate silver box. She lifted the lid, and inside, nestled amongst the tissue paper, lay the crystal frame and the folded note. Her hand hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. Noah leaned over, his brow furrowed in confusion. The note slid loose from her grasp and landed face up on the table, its secrets exposed for all to see. His eyes caught the screenshots before she could snatch them away, before she could regain control. He frowned, scanning the text messages printed in pale blue bubbles, his confusion slowly morphing into disbelief. A sentence jumped out at him, its words searing. Asterisk, he's so easy to handle. Cry a little and he buys anything I want. The music didn't stop right away. It just thinned, the joyous melody becoming strained and discordant. The violinist stumbled, missing a beat, the sour note hanging in the air like a curse. Leia's fingers trembled, her carefully applied makeup doing little to conceal the panic in her eyes. "This isn't..." "Someone's trying to." Noah didn't answer. He just kept reading, his eyes devouring each line, each word a betrayal, each revelation a deeper wound. The jokes about getting him to sign the prenup first, the casual plans for moving mom and dad into the guest house once he was settled, the cold, calculated manipulation, it was all there, laid bare for everyone to see. The same smug smirk she'd given me hours ago, the one that said "you don't count," was now frozen on her face, brittle and terrifying. "Who sent this?" she hissed, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of her downfall. Her mother-in-law, Victoria, a woman accustomed to command and unwavering respect, had been watching from across the room, her gaze sharp and assessing. When she heard the name Amber Hayes whispered by one of the bridesmaids, her expression hardened, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She crossed the floor with the slow, deliberate certainty of someone who was used to getting her way, her presence silencing the murmurs and drawing all eyes to her. "I think you should read the rest before you blame anyone," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "These came to me this morning, forwarded from a stylist you hired." Apparently, they were in the wrong thread. Leia's face drained of color, the carefully constructed facade of bridal bliss crumbling before their eyes. "That's not possible," she stammered, her voice shaking. Noah's voice was low, dangerous. "It's real, Leia. The dates match." He turned the final page, his hands trembling with a barely suppressed rage. A photo of her text message, glowing on the screen of her phone. Asterisk, "The house will be mine by Christmas." A collective gasp rippled through the guests, a wave of shock and disbelief washing over the room. Phones came out, discreetly recording the unfolding drama. The photographer froze mid-shot, his camera dangling uselessly from his hand. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," the words hanging in the air like a death knell. Leia lunged for the papers, desperate to regain control, to silence the truth before it consumed her. "You can't show people that." Victoria stepped between them, her gaze unwavering. "You showed it yourself, sweetheart." That was when the screaming started. Not loud at first, more like air escaping from a body too quickly. A choked gasp of despair. Leia stumbled back, the train of her gown catching under her heel, nearly sending her crashing to the floor. "No, you don't understand. He's lying. My sister. She did this." Noah's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with a righteous fury. "Amber didn't write those messages. She planted them. She's jealous. She's always—" "Stop!" The single word cracked through the room like a whip, silencing the murmurs and stopping Noah in his tracks. "You did this. You humiliated her today, and you thought no one would ever see who you really are." Every face had turned toward them now, every eye fixed on the unraveling spectacle. The DJ, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, lowered the volume of the music, the sudden silence amplifying the tension. A child's voice, innocent and confused, asked, "Mommy, what's happening?" Leia's perfect day was dissolving before her very eyes, and she couldn't hold it together anymore. She spun toward her parents, her eyes pleading for salvation. "Do something." My mother, Maggie, stood pale and stiff near the head table, her champagne glass trembling in her hand, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. My father looked at the floor, his lips pressed into a tight, disapproving line. For once, neither of them defended her, neither of them rushed to her rescue. "You knew," Noah said quietly, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "You knew exactly what you were doing." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded document, and set it on the table, the crisp paper a symbol of his finality. "This is an annulment petition. I already signed it." Leia stared at the paper as if it were a live wire, a source of unimaginable pain. "You can't, Noah, you can't humiliate me like this." "I'm not humiliating you," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You did that yourself." Someone turned off the music entirely, plunging the room into a silence so deep it buzzed in people's ears. A deafening void that amplified the tension and the unspoken accusations. Then came the sound that the guests would remember for years to come. The shattering of crystal as the frame hit the floor, the delicate glass exploding into a million shards, a fitting metaphor for the destruction of Leia's carefully constructed world. Her voice cracked, the sound raw and desperate. "She's behind this. Amber's behind all of it." Victoria exhaled slowly, her expression a mixture of pity and disgust. "Funny. The only thing your sister did was tell the truth. Outside, I'd stopped the car engine, letting it idle." The glow from the ballroom windows flickered across the surface of the lake, casting dancing shadows on the water. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard the scream. It came sharp and high, echoing across the water, a primal sound of rage and despair. It was followed by the dull thud of a chair tipping over, a chaotic punctuation mark in a scene of utter devastation. The sound I'd waited my whole life to hear, not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate need for closure, for some acknowledgement of the pain she had inflicted. Inside, Leia's mascara streaked down her cheeks, her perfect makeup ruined by the torrent of tears. "You'll regret this," she shouted, her voice breaking with a raw, unadulterated fury. Noah turned away, his shoulders heavy with disappointment. "No, Leia, you will." He walked off the dance floor, followed by Victoria, the crowd parting around them like a tide, their whispers following in their wake. Mom reached for Leia's arm, her touch hesitant and unsure. "Sweetheart, maybe we should step outside." "Don't touch me," she cried, pulling free from her grasp, her voice escalating into a hysterical sob. "You all wanted this. You never loved me enough." Dad spoke quietly, his voice barely audible, for the first time that night. "You should apologize to your sister." The words stunned everyone, even Mom, who stared at him with a mixture of shock and disbelief. But Leia only laughed, a hollow, brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Apologize to her? She's not even family." Dad shook his head slowly, his face etched with disappointment. "That's where you're wrong." He left it at that, turning away, his shoulders sagging as he followed the crowd towards the exit, leaving Leia alone in the ruins of her perfect day. By the time the lights dimmed and the staff began sweeping the broken glass from the floor, Leia sat alone under the chandelier, her dress, once dazzling, now looking heavy and wrinkled, a symbol of her tarnished dreams. The bouquet, its vibrant colors now dulled, had fallen beside her chair, its fragrant blooms offering no comfort. The same hands that had pushed me away, that had dismissed my feelings, now clutched at the air, desperate for something to hold on to, something to fill the void. She never saw me. I was already gone, a ghost slipping away into the night. Through the fogged car window, I watched as guests hurried out into the parking lot, their whispers trailing behind them like tendrils of smoke. Asterisk. It's all over social media already. Did you see his face? That poor girl. Asterisk asterisk, no, the other one, the sister. I always knew there was something off about her. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet sense of completion. I rested my hand on the steering wheel and thought about the hallway, the scene of my exile. The cloying smell of lilies and bleach, the squeaky folding chair, the constant reminder that I didn't belong. How it all started with a seat by the trash cans. How it ended with the truth laid bare, exposed for everyone who had ever looked through me to see. Justice didn't always roar, didn't always manifest in a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes, it whispered, "Now they see you." A quiet vindication that was more powerful than any shout of anger. The scream faded, swallowed by the vastness of the night. The lake went still again, glassy and calm, reflecting the cold indifference of the moon. I turned the key in the ignition, the headlights washing over the gravel, and drove away from the sound of my sister's perfect world collapsing behind me, leaving the wreckage in my rearview mirror. By the time I reached Boston, the sky was beginning to lighten, the first hint of dawn painting the horizon with streaks of gray and pink. The highway signs blurred past, a meaningless stream of information. The hum of the tires a steady, low thrum, like white noise after years of shouting I'd learned to ignore, a constant reminder of the chaos I was leaving behind. My phone buzzed incessantly in the cup holder, a frantic chorus of unanswered calls. 16 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't check any of them. The quiet was worth more than any explanation, any apology, any attempt to rewrite history. When I stepped into my apartment, it smelled faintly of coffee and rain, a comforting reminder of the life I had built for myself, a sanctuary far removed from the drama and dysfunction of my family. The city outside was waking up, headlights flashing across my window, illuminating the familiar skyline. I hung my dress on the back of a chair and stared at it, the deep wine color still flawless, untouched by the night's events. It looked like armor I hadn't known I was wearing, a shield against the barbs of their indifference. A new message appeared on my phone screen, its words a desperate plea. Asterisk, please answer, Amber. We didn't know. That was Mom. She always said that when things finally went wrong, when the carefully constructed facade crumbled. Asterisk, we didn't know. Asterisk, but she had known all along. Every time she'd told me to stay quiet, every time she'd laughed at Leia's jokes at my expense, every time she'd said, "You're fine," she had known. I put the phone face down on the counter and opened my laptop instead, severing the connection to the past. A map of Maine blinked back at me, dotted with tiny coastal towns, each one a promise of escape, a chance to start anew. I picked one at random, somewhere I'd never been, a place where the only sound was the crashing of waves and the cry of seagulls, and clicked, book. A week by the water sounded like peace, a balm for my wounded soul. Before leaving, I stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in the crisp morning air, the city air smelling cleaner than it had in years, washed clean by the rain. Across the river, the morning sun cut the skyline into gold and shadow, a new day dawning. They could keep their apologies, their explanations, their carefully curated versions of the truth. I had mine now, etched in the silence of my own heart. For the first time in my life, silence didn't mean being unseen, unheard, insignificant. It meant being free, liberated from their expectations, their judgments, their suffocating control. At my sister's wedding, I was seated by the trash cans, relegated to the margins of their lives. This morning, I'm sitting by the river, watching the sun rise over the city, a world of possibilities stretched out before me. Same silence, different meaning. Back then, it was humiliation, a constant reminder of my perceived worthlessness. Now it's peace, a quiet strength born from self-acceptance. Sometimes, the loudest revenge isn't a scream, isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's the sound of your own footsteps walking away, the quiet click of a door closing behind you, the definitive act of choosing yourself. They thought I'd always stay, waiting for their approval, begging for their love. But I don't wait anymore. I don't beg for space at someone else's table. I build my own, and I invite only those who see me, who value me, who celebrate my worth. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people who were supposed to love you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, know this: walking away isn't weakness. It's not an admission of defeat. It's the beginning of freedom, the first step on a path towards a life of your own choosing, a life filled with genuine connection and unwavering self-worth. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from your own family?